Welcome, everybody. My name is Leah Sanchez, and I'm the head of programs and outreach at the Textile Museum of Canada. On behalf of the museum, I'd like to welcome you all to Bharosa, an evening of conversations. I'm speaking to you from my home in Toronto, which is also where the museum is located, the Textile Museum is located. It is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work here and through our activities seek to create a space for people to share, learn, and celebrate the textile practices of today and long ago in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So I'm very excited to welcome artist Jagdeep Raina, whose exhibition Chase is currently installed at the Textile Museum of Canada. Chase is curated by Dr. Shauna McCabe of the Art Gallery of Guelph. So as most of you may know, the museum is closed to the public due to current provincial restrictions, but I hope that if you haven't already come by and see the exhibition once the museum reopens. So tonight's event was curated by Jagdeep, and he will be introducing the three other artists who are part of Bharosa. I'd like to turn you over now to Jagdeep. Welcome, Jagdeep.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited for this program. Before I get more into the program's structure, I wanted to say that I'm speaking from Houston, Texas, which once served as a site of Indigenous people, specifically the Arakapa Ishak, the Tapulamqua Hulitikan, the Sana Band of the Tankawa tribe, and the Karankawa nations. Only the Arakapa Ishak and the Tapulamqua Hulitikan nations have survived colonization. I commit to addressing my complicity by remaining in direct opposition to colonial violence and strive to practice solidarity with Indigenous peoples always. I'm so grateful for today's program and event. Chase has been an exhibition that first opened at the Art Gallery of Guelph in 2019, and then it traveled to Brampton, Ontario at the Peel Art Museum and Archives, and finally now in Toronto at the Textile Museum of Canada. And for each leg of the exhibition, I got the opportunity to curate programs where I invited different artists and writers and filmmakers to present their work and just be in conversation with some of the themes and ideas that I was working with when putting together this exhibition. I think for me, Chase is really inspired by thinking about the role I think historical memory plays, specifically in shaping communities and how communities emerge by the complex forces of migration. And then also how over time communities can come together, but then after they form, they can also gradually erode and they can disperse as well. So always thinking about this idea of historical memory and how it shapes the way we carry ourselves and how history shapes the way we carry ourselves. There's many artists that I consider almost alumni that I've gotten a chance to work with throughout these programs. And so in 2019, it was Kiran Rai and Gurjit Basi and the writer Akhil Kumarasamy, as well as the photographers Biljit Basi and Biljit Singh. Then in Brampton, we had Pamela Matharu and Surinder Dhaliwal and Simranpreet Anand. And now finally, I get to work with and invited three amazing artists, Selena Dillon and Amrit Singh and Sumit Judge to share their work for tonight's program. And I also want to thank Kathy Gray and Kim Anderson, who wrote the beautiful wall text that you can see once the museum is open. So I think thinking a lot about this program, I wanted to curate and bring together three different artists who have inspired the way I approach my work. Curating together a program with these three artists who really have kind of pushed and investigated the way I think about my own work. And so bringing together Sumit's film and Amrit's writing and Selena's music has been a way for me to think about their practice and the way that I can put it into conversation with this exhibition. So before I begin, I just wanted to start off with our very first artist who will be screening his film, Vishal. So Sumit is a multidisciplinary artist. He's based in Toronto, and he's currently a member of the People of the Community YouTube channel, where he writes, produces, and participates in comedic sketches, a weekly podcast, and live charity roasts. The podcast brings light to pressing issues within the South Asian community, such as mental health, intergenerational trauma, and human rights abuses through an informal, relatable, and at times comedic lens. His first short film, Vishal, deals with the plight of the South Asian international student in Canada. Vishal has been screened on Air Canada flights, ZTV USA, and at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And Sumit is currently writing a book on South Asian successes set to be published in the spring of 2023. I've known Sumit for many, many, many years. I first saw this film, Vishal, in 2015, and I was completely blown away by it. And it kind of continued to live in my head for many, many years since then. And I always wanted to think about bringing this film into the context of this exhibition I've been working on, specifically themes around community and historical memory and the ways in which for bonds and groups of people come together and how they disperse for time. And I feel like this film is almost like a time capsule to some of the issues that are currently plaguing different migrant communities across both in Canada and the US too. So I'm just so grateful and so appreciative of Sumit, who has agreed to allow us to screen this really beautiful film. So I'm going to turn it over now to Leah, and she will screen Vishal, and I hope you guys enjoy.
हेलो
हाँ विशाल उठ गया
हाँ जी भी नहीं उठिया सी
अच्छा तो हम तो स्कूल चलना
बस कुछ खान ਨੂੰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲੱਗੀ ਸੀ ਕਲਾਸ ਅੱਜ ਦੁਪਹਿਰੇ
अच्छा फिर तेरा काम कितना जा रहा है
ਕੰਮ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਬਸ ਪੇਪਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੋ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਪਰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ
तेरी याद बहुत आती
वापस आ जा
हाँ पढ़ उठ के आ जा तू ठीक है ना
हाँ जी
कॉलेज आना अज
बोल के नहीं सके
हाँ भी तेरी गल बन गई
बस काबली
हाँ वो गुरप्रीत मुंडा नहीं गा IT ਦਾ
ਉਹੀ ਸੈਨਿਕ ਹੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ
ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਲੋਹੜੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੋਈ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਿਜ਼ੀ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਬੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਣਾ
ਤੇ 5-6 ਦੇਣਗੇ
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ
ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਟੈਕਸਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਚੱਲ ਜਾ
ਪਰ ਮੇਰੀ
ਅਸਾਈਨਮੈਂਟਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਯਾਰ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਰਹੂੰਗੀਆਂ ਹੁਣ ਮਸੀ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕੰਮ ਲੱਭ ਕੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਜਾਇਆ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਵਿਹਲਾ ਬੈਠਾ। ਤੇ ਤੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਰੀ ਰਾਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਕਿਸੇ ਤੋਂ ਨੋਟਸ ਲੈ ਲਈ ਤੇ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਆਪਦਾ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਲਈ।
हाँ भाई भांडे छड़ दे तो डिलीवरी करेगा।
ठीक है भाई।
ਬਸ ਵੈਨ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਥੋੜੀ ਗਰਮ, ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਫਿਰ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਭਾਜੀ।
ਬਾਕੀ ਕੀ ਨਾਮ ਆਪਣਾ ਵੀਰੇ?
ਭਾਜੀ ਵਿਸ਼ਾਲ।
ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ?
ਪਿੱਛੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ।
ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕੋਰਸ ਆਇਆ ਇੱਥੇ?
ਭਾਜੀ IT ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੈਨਿਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ।
ਵਧੀਆ, ਪੜ੍ਹ ਲਓ ਯਾਰ।
ਤੁਸੀਂ?
ਮੈਂ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਹੰਬਰ ਕਾਲਜ ਆਇਆ। 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਮੇਰਾ, ਅਜੇ 2 ਸਮੈਸਟਰ ਲਾਏ ਨੇ। ਬਾਕੀ ਅਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਕੰਮ ਹੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਪਿਆ। ਦੇਖੋ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚੋਂ ਜੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਪੂਰੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ।
ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ PR ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ?
PR ਹੋ ਜੂਗੀ ਯਾਰ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਗਏ ਆ ਤਾਂ PR ਵੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਣੀ ਆ। ਬਾਕੀ ਗਾਣਾ ਸੁਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਤੈਨੂੰ। देखी बिजी बहुत हो गया, बस समोसे तल ला, रोटी बाद चो खा ली। आ जा छेती।
भाई आलूआं दा बोरा लिया उपरू जाके।
ਇਹਨੂੰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਦੇ ਲੈ ਜਾਈਏ।
ਲੈ ਸਾਲਿਆ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਤੇਰਾ। ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਵਾਲੇ ਕੀ ਕਹੂਗੇ? ਮਾਮਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਚੈੱਕ ਤੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਦਿੰਨੇ ਆ। ਜਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਬੱਸ ਸਟਾਪ ਛੱਡ ਆ, ਪੈਸੇ ਪੂਸੇ ਦੇ ਦੀ, ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕਹੀਂ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੇ।
ਠੀਕ ਆ ਨਾ?
Thank you so much for sharing such a powerful film and really making us think about these issues of migration and the darker sides of what it means to be an immigrant today, and the ways in which art can be a tool to, and filmmaking can be a tool to address what students are going through, and what we as a diaspora can start thinking about ways in which we can address these communities' needs. And it's a film that I continue to reflect on as the years go by, and I'm so grateful that we could show it. I feel like Sumit's film is a perfect segue into the next artist that I wanted to invite and curate for today's program. And that artist's name is Amrit Singh. Amrit Singh, also known as Noise, is an author, a rapper, a spoken word artist, and a community organizer from Brampton, Ontario. In addition to headlining shows in the US, the UK, and multiple provinces across Canada, Noise facilitates hip hop and mental health workshops where he engages with youth through the healing and transformational powers of music and songwriting. He self-published his first book, Keep Moving On, The Migration of a Punjabi-Sikh Family, in 2020. Amrit's artistry has always taught me that when it comes to the formation of diasporas, sometimes the chase for a better life is positive and encouraged, but sometimes it can also result in a scarcity mentality. And it can further divide and alienate people based on different castes and classes and economic statuses and gender and sexuality and nationality and race and religion. And he's an artist who has always turned to for many years now to make me think about dismantling this myth of a community being homogenous. And he's inspired me for many years to think about how we can fight back against this scarcity mentality that not only sometimes can creep within all of us as people, but as artists. And his work gives me that courage. So I'm so grateful that we got a chance to have Amrit participate in today's program. And I got a chance to read his book, The Migration of a Punjabi-Sikh Family, Keep Moving On. And I'm going to put a link in the description for everyone to check his book out. And I highly recommend it. It was one of the most beautiful reads of 2021. So Amrit, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Jagdeep. So as mentioned, I'll be reading a chapter from my book, Keep Moving On. And I guess the main storyline throughout the book is myself trying to having conversations with different members of my family, trying to document their history of migration from Punjab to Canada in the GTA in the Greater Toronto area, and just exploring the hidden history of immigrants that come here and how their story sometimes doesn't get told. And so this particular chapter I'm reading is an abridged version of a conversation I had with my uncle. So when you hear me, if for those that don't speak Punjabi, I refer to him as Master Ji. And he was the first one of my family to arrive in Toronto back in 1970. So I'll be reading part of our conversation. Where does it all start? I asked. Where did the idea of leaving Punjab come from? Master Ji explained that he and his younger brother Harbhajan first heard of America when they were teenagers. Growing up, they were immersed in the culture of Punjab. They played field hockey and kabaddi and acted in school plays based on the life of Bhagat Singh. The older they got, though, the more they learned of the world around them. They read a book in high school called America and Her People that had pictures of American things like Cadillac cars and the landscapes of Alaska. They told themselves they would drive that car and visit that place one day. They came from a poor farming family in Punjab, and just like Dad, they were plunged deep into debt with the introduction of the Green Revolution in the 60s. There was no future in India, Masterji said. I wasn't expecting his answer to be so simple, so hopeless. I graduated from Punjab University in the 60s and worked as a machinist, he continued. I operated a metalworking lathe at a factory during the days and taught classes at the university in the evenings. Our family was poor, though. I could have stayed working as a machinist or as a teacher, but there wasn't any opportunity in that, not for the level of poverty we were in. Masterji detailed how he had used the money he earned from his metalworking and teaching jobs to construct several roads and a sewer system in his village of Tilwan, but he wasn't earning enough cash to bring about the type of change he wanted to see for the community. My parents had neighbors and friends around that time who sent their kids to work in the UK, he explained. 1 British pound was worth a lot of rupees back then. People who started with 5 acres of land now had over 100 acres after their children went away to Europe. The rest of us in the village only saw the results of the work. We had no idea what people were actually doing once they left Punjab. I saw how things were going and how stuck we were. Once I made up my mind, my parents supported me in whatever direction I wanted to go. If everyone else was going to England, how did you decide on Canada? I asked. I had only ever heard the name of Canada. I really didn't know where or what it was, Masterji smiled. I needed to make money and people told us Canada was where the money was. My plan was to come here for 5 or 6 years, save up and go back home to Punjab. If the family didn't have much money though, how did you travel? I asked. I had to borrow the money. Masterji and his parents had to turn to the same predatory system of private lenders that Dadaji dealt with in the 60s. I didn't understand why so many people went to these loan sharks when the interest rates were so high, but that was a desperation I had never experienced before. I didn't know what it was like to live somewhere and feel that there was no other option but to escape. I tried to come to Canada twice in 1970, Masterji explained. I first tried in March, but the travel agent I paid to arrange my flight took my money and ran off with it. I never saw him again. I had to take out another loan. I eventually came to Canada in August of that year. The last thing my mom said to me before I left home was to look out for my older sister and to do whatever I could to bring her to Canada once I was able to get myself settled. Masterji explained that as two nations part of the British Commonwealth, citizens of India didn't need a visa to enter Canada at the time. Dad had also mentioned this loophole to me before. He told me how Indians back in the 60s and 70s would fly to Canada without needing any documentation other than a passport. Some of them used the opportunity to work for jobs that paid cash off the books and under the table. Travel agents in India were capitalizing on people's desires to earn money in the West to the point they sometimes booked entire chartered planes full of Indian nationals to send to Canada for the purposes of undocumented labor. I didn't have anywhere to go when I landed in Toronto, so I stayed at Pape Gurdwara, Masterji said. The Gurdwara on Pape Avenue in Toronto was established in April 1969, just a year before he had arrived. Prior to its opening, the small Sikh population in the city used to gather at community centers in the area for monthly kirtans and services, but they sought to establish a more permanent home for themselves. The Gurdwara on Pape was the first one in Ontario. It's a really hard life to come to Canada and try settling down when you don't have anyone to help you, Masterji continued. The support I received from people who I didn't know and who didn't have to help me was so important in those years. Masterji shared that he had met a man who frequently attended Pape Gurdwara named KP, who lived in Whitby, a small town east of Toronto. Originally a Sikh from Kenya, KP owned several properties and businesses back home that provided him with a bit more financial security in Canada. After KP negotiated with his landlord an increase of $40 per month in rent to cover the cost of an extra tenant in the unit, KP and his wife welcomed Masterji into their home. He opened his wallet as well, telling Masterji to take cash whenever he needed it. He didn't want anything from me, Masterji said, blinking back tears. He just told me to pay him back whenever I got on my feet and was able to make money for myself. Even after I was settled, though, he didn't take $1 from me. Masterji was able to get landed immigrant status by December 1970. What was your first job you worked when you came to Toronto? I asked. I passed the trades test and got my work permit, he replied. I applied anywhere I could, whether it was related to my field of study or not. Every employer told me the same thing, though, that I needed Canadian work experience. Of course, I didn't have any at this point, so as an immigrant, there was no way I could get hired. Some employers said they would only hire me if I cut my hair and shaved my beard. Masterji wore the star and had a long beard for as long as I could remember. When he didn't have his beard knotted up, it flowed down to his navel. When I was younger, I had seen some pictures of him and Dad from their early days in Canada. What I didn't know at the time, though, was that they were forced to look that way, reduced by Western fears in order to survive in places that didn't accept them. Feeling he had no choice if he wanted to find work and earn money in Canada, Masterji cut his hair and got his first job in late 1970, working as a security guard at the Royal York Hotel in downtown Toronto. He earned $1.38 an hour. A few months later, I got a job at a factory in Mississauga that made truck parts, Masterji shared. The work there was so busy, there was no time to even wipe your sweat. By this point, Masterji had left Whitby and moved back to Toronto, closer to Pape Gurdwara, where he rented an apartment with 6 other Punjabi immigrants. The new job paid $2.38 an hour. He was so happy that he was making a whole dollar more. At his new job, Masterji was paired with the only other person of color in the factory, another Punjabi man who had started working there just one day earlier. The two of them were stationed at the busiest part of the factory where they had to remove and organize parts that came down a conveyor belt. Compared to the overt biases that he had faced from employers who demanded that he cut his hair in order to be hired for a job, this was a move that he considered to be more subtle in its prejudice. If he and his colleagues weren't able to keep up with the pace that would slow down the workflow and draw the ire of everyone else on the all-white staff, it was an intentional move by management to force the two of them to get fed up with the work and quit. The subways didn't start running until 6 a.m. back then, Masterji recalled, so I had to take a bus from my apartment at Pape and Gerrard to get to Eglinton Station, and then take another bus to get to Mississauga where the factory was. There was hardly any bus service in Mississauga, so I would have to walk 4 kilometers from the bus stop to get to work. Even when there was 2 feet of snow on the ground, I still made that walk twice a day. What did you do on weekends? I asked. There had to be more to his life back then than just the factory, I thought. There was no time to do anything. I worked from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. from Monday to Friday, and from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends. By the time I got home on a weekday, it would be after 10 at night. I would slap some peanut butter on a piece of bread before going to bed and do the whole thing all over again the next day. When I came home after work, I would have a few drinks to help me sleep. I needed something to get to bed quickly so I could go to work again in the morning. I would work, drink, and lie down. That was the cycle. I felt that if I needed to work this hard to get by, I might as well go home and work hard in Punjab instead. Masterji noted that he got his opportunity to go back home to Punjab a few months after he had started working at the factory in Mississauga. In June 1971, he received a letter from his father informing him that his mother had fallen ill and was being monitored at a hospital in Ludhiana. He booked himself on the earliest flight he could find to be with his ailing mother in Punjab. When he had made it home to Delwan, he was greeted by his Masi. She was surprised to see me, Masterji said. He spoke slowly, like it hurt him for each word to leave his chest. I asked her how my mom was doing, but my Masi was quiet. There was a long pause before she said, "Did nobody tell you? The funeral's already over." Masterji wiped a tear from his eye before it could fall. He inhaled deeply and collected his composure. People in the village asked me more about why I was back in Punjab than they did about my mother, he said. They asked me if I had got deported or if I had given up on making it in Canada. As much as Masterji had thought about leaving Toronto behind and returning to Punjab permanently, he remembered the promise he made to his mother that he would help the family and look out for his older sister. He wasn't about to go back on his word now. Upon his return to Toronto in the summer of 1971, Masterji described that the working conditions of the factory were the least of his worries. As migration from other parts of South Asia to Toronto increased, so too did racial tensions. It wasn't just employers being racist to us behind closed doors, he said. People who looked like me were getting beaten up in the streets. A lot of Indians formed gangs for self-defense against the white buggers who were beating us up. I knew people who kept cricket bats in their trunks in case they got attacked. We fought them in the courts too. Masterji explained that when he volunteered as a secretary at Pape Gurdwara, a Sikh man came in who was being denied a job with the Toronto Transit Commission. He was told to cut his hair and shave his beard if he wanted to be a streetcar driver, and he asked if the Gurdwara could give him a letter that explained the importance of hair in Sikhi and why he couldn't be asked to cut his. We took his case to the Ontario Labour Board and won, Masterji said. It was the first time a Sikh had won a case like that in Ontario, he smiled. In 1971 and 72, Masterji supported his brothers Nirmolik and Harpajan in moving from Punjab to Toronto. I thought about how Masterji fought for himself and for the people he belonged to. It was through his struggle that people who look like me became normalized in this part of the world. He paid it forward for us the same way KP did for him. I also thought about how much things hadn't changed since 1970. Living in Malton for the first 11 years of my life, nearly all my friends were from South Asia and the Caribbean. When we moved to Brampton in 1998, though, that all changed. I didn't see the same faces I grew up with. I heard racial epithets from white classmates daily, sometimes from kids who said the word so often that they didn't know they were using slurs, privileged enough to be oblivious to consequence. Other times, the words were used against me with all the intention of a sharpened prison shank. Sometimes people hurled curses out of their car windows when they drove by me and dad as we worked in the front yard. My partka and later my dastard were host to the unwelcome hands of classmates, teachers, and airport security guards who all poked and grabbed at my head without asking. Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. This isn't your country. You should be thankful that we even allowed your people in. I heard them all time and time again. It was exhausting that I wasn't allowed to just be, that I had to constantly explain and defend myself. Some days I felt that it would have been easier not to fight back and just let the hate wash over me. I wondered how Masterji had the bravery not to give in. So that's all I wanted to share of this particular chapter. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it back to Jagdeep.
Thank you so much, Amrit. That was, such a beautifully written passage. I feel like Amrit's words are the perfect segue to introduce our final guest, Selena Dillon. Selena is an international singer, a songwriter, born and raised in Brampton, Ontario. Selena advocates music as a therapy to heal, love, and empower. And her music has been featured on notable platforms such as 93.5 The Move, BBC Radio, TIFF, and MXNE. While earning a master's degree in international affairs from the New School in New York City, Selena made her debut as an actor and performs roles in commercial, animation, and narrative voiceovers. Selena's artistry has always taught me personally about the power of connectivity and the ways in which we are all a part of histories and narratives that are larger than ourselves. Her music has always inspired me to know that we are all connected by our shared humanity. And one more quick fun fact, Selena is actually featured in the Chase exhibition. She is the voiceover for one of the films that's on view in the exhibition. So I'm so thrilled for having this full circle moment with Selena and to introduce the audience to her beautiful music. Thank you, Selena.
I'd go to the moon for you, just to prove it's possible. And I'd swim to the deepest blue, just to prove it's possible. In a world telling you who to be, where to go, what to believe. When you find yourself doubting anything, look beyond, see the possible. When I lay my head at night, I dream a place is possible, where I feel enough and I don't not live out the box in this design, beyond the way I was told. Only way to win this mental war is to let go and talk more, 'cause silence is killing my soul. I wanna leave home without a mail on. I wanna speak up without a veil on. Free from the fears and the men, 'cause a strong girl can't win. There's a place for everyone to rise. I close my eyes, it's gonna be alright. Good evening, everyone. The song I just performed is called Possible. And the next piece I'm going to perform is called Nimrita. And Nimrita in Punjabi means to show humility. And it was a song that was inspired by a conversation I had with my grandmother right before she passed away. And she pulled me in really close. She had not enough voice to really say much, but she reminded me of the word that she used throughout our lives. She would always say, show Nimrita, be Nimrita, before anything else. And after she passed away, it wasn't until I had actually asked my grandfather what this photograph was of. It is a photograph of my grandmother. Oh, I think the glare is on it. A photograph of my grandmother. And this photograph was actually taken in Jammu Kashmir. My grandfather was stationed in the Air Force at the time. It was the mid-1950s. And my grandmother and grandfather went for a walk one night, and she was just breathtaken by the beauty of the women in Kashmir. And so she told my grandfather, I want a photograph here. And she told him to take off his shirt so that she could model herself like the women in the field that were herding the sheep. And so this was that moment. And Jagdeep was actually inspired to weave a piece of this image, and it is in the exhibit as well. Nimrita. On her last days, secrets she told, hand in hand, wisdom she spoke. No matter what you do, bow your head, never be too proud. No matter what you get, no matter what you do, bow your head, never be too proud. No matter what you get. If you must do it all, never forget where you came from. God-given gifts, you are enough. You love that boy, but don't settle. No matter what you do, bow your head, never be too proud. No matter what you get, no matter what you do, bow your head, never be too proud. No matter what you get, no matter what you do, bow your head. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selena, for that beautiful performance. It was absolutely moving, and what a beautiful way to end the program. I wanted to say that, you know, when putting together this program, I thought a lot about the word trust, and in Punjabi, the word trust means Bharosa, which was the title that we decided to go with when putting together this program. And I worked with an incredible artist in the UK, Navir Singh, and his partner Jagdish, and they made the beautiful poster. And I was thinking a lot about that word Bharosa, you know, which translates to trust, and thinking about how it serves as a focal point and inspiration for me personally in putting this program together. And so, you know, all three of you guys have shown so much trust in sharing your art with all of us today. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you, Amrit. Thank you, Selena. You know, each of the three of you have built this vast skill set as artists. And, you know, I've been lucky enough to see the three of you guys go through so many evolutions and transformations as artists while always holding on to your sense of creativity for the many, many years that I've known you. So for that, I also want to say thank you as well. And I've been thinking a lot about some questions. I've been mulling over some questions in my head to ask you guys. And I also want to invite the audience as well to get into the chat and ask questions as well, if you guys would like to participate in the conversation. But I think the first question I wanted to ask is thinking a lot about the ways in which the three of you have built an artistic practice that is really, really interdisciplinary. So, I mean, I've known each of you individually for over 10 years, on and off through the years, seeing you guys perform and working as community organizers and, you know, studying in different programs and doing different master's degrees and, you know, going to law schools. And you guys have really kind of collected this vast interdisciplinary practice. And it's really made me think a lot about how we can, as artists, can constantly step outside of our comfort zones and build our skill set when we think about the kind of work that we want to make. So I think the first question is more of like a formal question, but I think when making a new work, how did the three of you kind of use process of elimination to narrow down which skill set you guys would like to draw upon, depending on the type of work that you guys are going to be executing in that moment? So I think, for example, Sumit, like what made you specifically choose film as a medium to show Vishal, or Amrit, what made you turn to the written word and to the memoir when you wanted to write about Keep Going On? And Selena, talk a bit more about honing in on your practice as a musician when coming back to the process of writing Nimrita. How do you guys make the kind of these formal decisions when approaching a new work, kind of based on this vast pool of skill sets that you guys have built over the many years? Whoever would like to go.
Well, thanks, Jagdeep, for having me on. And honestly, I have like 1/40th the talent of everyone else on the panel. So thanks for doing this service to me. For me, it was a process of elimination. Like after my second short film, I really realized I don't really like making movies. It's a lot of hard work. It's very collaborative, which can be great for certain people. But it's convincing a lot of people to believe in your vision. And for me, it's just like trying a bunch of things. And now I feel like maybe writing is my thing, but maybe 6 months from now, I might think that's not my thing either. I might like get into NFTs. I don't know. But for me, it's legitimately been trying a bunch of things, making 2 short films, doing a podcast, doing sketches, and now like working on this book. So I want to sort of, work on that artistic itch and get whatever's in my head out. I'm just trying to find the medium. And I feel like actually, like if I look at you three, you guys have almost perfected the medium that you guys, are working on. And I hope to get there one day where I can specialize in something and get my message across more effectively. So I'm still working on it, to be honest.
Well,
I think Sumit hit the nail on the head there. It's about finding the right medium for the particular project. Like I've had the idea of wanting to do this book for such a long time, but trying to put it in song didn't feel like enough. Trying to put it in you're kind of limited within the context of a song because you only have so many minutes to play with. But I felt like with the book, putting it in a memoir format, it allowed me a lot more space just to kind of, dig into different pockets. Like there's some sections that are only a couple of paragraphs long, but it talks about, military history within the family, for example, which then you can learn how to, and then I find ways to tie that into the main narrative. So I find ways to, what is the main story that I want to tell? And then, having little, I guess, kind of detours. So I feel like the book in particular just is more open to that type of format. And just gives you more room to play, with language, with style. And I feel like, it was the right fit for a project of this scope rather than a song.
Yeah, and I mean, Amrit, you also turned this book into an EP as well, into like a record. Can you talk a bit more about the experiences of recording an EP as well for this book, and what were the decisions in doing that, and how you kind of, do you see the two projects as separate, or do you see them kind of almost like a diptych, like coexisting together?
Yeah, they're definitely they definitely go hand in hand. So the music that I recorded for the book actually kind of came from a sense of insecurity, because I've been doing music for so long, and I felt like doing a book was such a big jump. I didn't feel fully confident in my ability as a writer, or why anyone would care about this particular project. So I thought, even if people don't want to read the book, I still have a piece of music that they can listen to. So it kind of came from like that security blanket feeling where, I'm jumping into an entirely new project, but at least I have music to go with it. So even if people don't like the book, this still exists for what they know me for. But what I found as I was working on both was, the music allowed me to kind of expand on the themes. So whereas the book kind of tells very individual stories, the music can elaborate on broader themes that exist within the book, whether that's, isolation, whether that's, racism experience, whether that's resilience, whether that's hope. So they definitely go hand in hand, where the book is kind of the music is like a sister piece to the book that expands and elaborates on it and really complements it. But it came from, just, I guess, a lack of belief in my abilities as a writer. So even though we're all talking about trying new mediums, sometimes that it doesn't immediately click, and there can always be a lack of confidence in the initial starting phase. I don't know if you guys experience that when you're trying different mediums.
Yeah, I think it comes from that moment. Firstly, when I when I go into creation, it's coming from a place of therapy, because for me, that's how I process a lot. So whatever it is that I need, whether it's going to my journal to write and then that becoming a song, or just getting on the mic and letting myself flow, that is a therapy. And so whatever needs to come out will come out, and it'll take shape after. I rarely think about the medium I'm going to use when I start creating something. I let it tell me what it needs to be. And that really always reveals itself afterwards, after it's kind of sparked. And I think in a sense, like with music, I stem from it comes from my voice. And so I've been able to use my voice in different mediums now, like a film, or even in something that's written, just solely written, and starting to get into publishing my own written work. So it just comes from the voice. And I think that's something that we all have, as something that everybody can tap into, whether or not you can sing a note or not. It's still a voice. I mean, if you write a script, but it's still a voice, right? You're coming from that place of articulating something, whether it's through the pen or through a camera. It's a voice, it's your perspective.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest takeaway that I've just received from each of those three responses is like, it's like a simple takeaway, but it's something that I think is really powerful. I think whenever we think about creativity, it always requires courage, because I think that's ultimately the place we have to kind of go back to kind of fight back against self-doubt and not kind of trap our own selves into these boxes. And I think the three of you have really kind of demonstrated and taught me that, as artists for many years. And it made me think also a lot about, I think, persistence in this idea of courage, and I think those are some things that are integral, definitely, as to the work of an artist. But what other words of advice would the three of you like to share with our audience today on how to build persistence, how to build courage, how to build resilience as artists?
I think for me, it's about showing up for yourself every day. Like last year, I don't really do resolutions, but a goal that I had for myself was every day I want to spend at least some time every day writing, and whether that was writing a verse or writing a paragraph or writing a journal entry, that just giving myself that time and showing up for myself for that, I think was a big part of development of artistic craft. Because sometimes I saw this really great thing that an author J.L. Richardson had posted, sometimes we don't have to necessarily be actively working on our craft. Sometimes the life experience we go through is development of our craft. Sometimes the things we watch or the things we read is development of our craft, because ultimately it feeds back into it. So I think, being aware and like tapping into your own consciousness and your own self and your own awareness, and finding meaning within your experiences, I think is a big part of developing artistic craft. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but just showing up for yourself and really getting to understand yourself and know yourself, I think is a big part of being an artist.
That makes me think of As Above, So Below, Amrit, which is a project that Amrit and I recorded together. And it's like what you just said kind of made me think of going within. When you go within, just to allow yourself to give whatever you need will be something that you can do without, like you can do on the outside. And I think that's part of a process too. Part of the process is going within first. For yourself and for whatever that is, whether it's just sitting with yourself with a journal, or just going with a paintbrush the way I know Jagdeep has done, or just trying something, just picking up a material that speaks to you. I think that's something where that's where the spark happens. That was actually going to be a question I had for all of you. What was your spark? Because that all creation kind of happens from that spark. So is that something that any of you kind of felt in your process in creating the book and the film, Jagdeep, and the exhibit? That spark.
I think that's definitely a really beautiful way to reflect on finding that spark. And I think, Amrit and Selena, just now you both touched on it. Really going within. I think, that process, kind of sitting with ourselves and being still with ourselves and really asking, what are our curiosities for the day? And like just playing with those curiosities and sitting with them and trying to unpack and learn them, and then think about what kind of life those curiosities that are kind of existing within us, what kind of life they can take. That's a spark. I think curiosity can definitely be the ultimate spark, because it reveals itself in so many ways. And I think some of the best ways it reveals itself is when it gently reminds us to always be questioning and asking questions, and to always be thinking about the world around us and the things about the world that are affecting us, whether it is the good and the bad. And Sumit, what about your process? Your artistic practice for me has always been really interesting, because I remember years ago when we hung out in London, I think 6 years ago now, and you were telling me about your experiences in law school, and you were telling me about, and now seeing you work on a podcast and have a YouTube channel too. Your role as an artist for me has always been really fascinating, because it's kind of like you're subverting the role of what it means to be a producer and what it means to be even a lawyer, and you're taking on those roles and you're making them really, really artistic. And can you speak about that? Can you speak about kind of almost like this chameleon-like nature that I've always been inspired by within how you kind of carry yourself, both in these many roles? And do you find sometimes that they blur? Do you find sometimes that you're able to kind of differentiate the three?
I just wish I was good at one of the things that I do. So that's what I struggle with. And also, it was great listening to Selena's and yours and Amrit's answers, because I have a severe imposter syndrome. I deal with it a ton. So when we were playing my short film, I had to walk out of the room and do laundry, because I was thinking about all the things that I did wrong and not appreciating that, it's a decent film. So for me, I still struggle with self-confidence and self-esteem. So that's why I try a bunch of things. I don't think yet I have that confidence to really pursue one medium, even professionally. I might quit being a lawyer in 2 years. I don't know. So for me, it's real mental. But one thing that's something that I've really come to terms with recently is, I've lost a lot of loved ones during COVID. And I don't think I lived life enough knowing that tomorrow is not really certain. Like I might not even see tomorrow. And with that in mind, I've put more of an effort into pursuing my artistic endeavors and not really caring about the outcome, and just finding peace in the fact that I'm doing, right? And not so much who's watching, how great it is, quote unquote, but just finding, solace in that. So I still struggle with the mental element, but I think recently, losing people that you really love, I think that really like wakes you up, right? You want to live every moment to the fullest in that respect. So I just do whatever the hell I want to do now. And if it's good, it's good. If it's great, if it's bad, it's bad. So I think that's really driving me now, and it's making me work on that imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's real for sure. I think sometimes there's like a feeling of being an artist where you're kind of living in like a pressure cooker, and it seems like anything might explode at any moment, and there's so much to do, and there's so much to say, and how do you get it all done, and like, where's the time going, and like we need like 38 hours in one day, and next thing you know, it's like 12 a.m. and like, what the hell, and like, where did my day go? Like
I read Amrit's book, and I freaking loved it. And I remember I was reading it, and I was halfway through, and I'm writing a book as well. Amrit's actually is a part of it. And I was like, this fucking guy, it's his first time, and this is brilliant. And that also, like, listening to Selena sing, and I've been to your exhibits, that's also like, sometimes it's like, that's the spark sometimes. It's like when you see friends who are like doing such great work, it makes you want to be like, let's it's really inspiring. And all three of you have played that role for me. There's several people in the diaspora, particularly in Toronto, who play that role as well. So like to Selena's question, I think that spark comes from you guys as well, in the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really beautiful nugget to reflect on. And I think another question that I now want to take it into is, I think community. I think I've known all three of you. Like Selena and Amrit, I remember seeing you guys perform 12 years ago now, 2009, 2010. And then I remember in 2018 when you guys invited me to make the artwork for the EP, and Sumit, I've known you for many, many years. And so, throughout the years, it's been amazing to always be in community with you guys, and many, many other artists that we've been in community with. And even though, nowadays, like it's harder to see the people that you once shared those spaces with early on when we were all kind of fighting our footing as artists. I think that concept of community is always something that that I find that you guys remind me of. And so do you guys want to talk a little bit about that, about what community has meant to you, and how to build kind of this network of artist friends, and also just like the role of friendship. What is the role of friendship and your guys' kind of artistic practices?
I saw a question actually that it was in the box here, and it relates to what you're saying, Jagdeep, about just how we establish careers and what community meant. And I think it came from community. I think we tapped into something individually, but when that started to grow is from community, right? Like having those performances together, collaborating, seeing each other, showing up for each other, and being there for a reason, because we all loved to do something. We all loved to use our creativity in a particular way for a certain cause or whatever it was. But yeah, just showing up for each other, in addition to what Amrit was saying before, showing up for yourself. But yeah, I think that's, for me, what it felt like, coming outside of myself, even feeling vulnerable to do it, but knowing that I wasn't alone. And for me, that was unifying and so comforting.
Yeah, I think my answer kind of ties into a question that Sophia put in the Q&A, talking about how do you navigate insecurity and uncertainty. And I feel like community was a big part of that. Sometimes as an artist, you want to try certain ideas, but you might not necessarily believe in yourself to execute those ideas. But having artists that you trust and artists that you believe in that are around you, it gives you a chance to, bounce ideas off them, and to be open and to be vulnerable with them, because you're going to get honest feedback in return. Whether they tell you to to tweak it in a certain way, or, whether they just give you that confidence to pursue it at all. So, I definitely know, working with people like Selena in the past and, other artists that I've, created great friendships with, that sense of community has been huge as far as, allowing me to feel comfortable in my own skin to try things, and, just letting me know that, your ideas have value. And, these are ideas and stories that need to be heard by the world. So I think a lot of what I've shared, if it wasn't for the community around me, probably wouldn't have been shared.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it can be scary to ask for help. And I've lucked out in the sense, like on this book that we're working on, Jagdeep's helped me a ton. I remember Jagdeep, I wanted to interview for the book, and instead he gave me like a list of 20 people that I could reach out to with their emails and contacts. And even with Amrit, I was like, hey, I almost didn't even ask him, like, hey, we got to do this. And he gave me an hour of his time. I think once you get past the asking phase, like that hurdle, everyone's like really willing to help, or at least give you 15 minutes of their time. So I think that's the hard part. Once you figure that out, for the most part, people are really willing to help.
Yeah. I'm kind of looking into the chat too, and we have some really cool questions. There's one by Jagdeep that I really liked. You have all very eloquently addressed the immigrant experience. How have you found it to particularly establish creative careers as South Asians in Canada?
I think it's hard to make art a career in general. I think it's harder, even more so in Canada compared to other places, just because there is a lack of resources. There's a lack, sometimes there can be a lack of, not a lack of interest, but a lack of understanding from some of the institutions that exist. I've had the opportunity to collaborate with, different granting bodies, and, a lot of it is still very old. A lot of it is not really up on what's contemporary or what is really going on in communities of color. So I kind of bumped heads a lot with, with the system. So yeah, I guess I've kind of changed what I look at my art for. And there definitely was a point where I was, kind of dead set on, I need to make this a career. But I think now, so it's more similar to what Sumit was saying. I just want to get these stories out. And I've read a really powerful quote, years ago that always stuck with me. It's like, I don't want to die with my song still in me. So I definitely want to keep working on stuff that I'm doing, whether or not it gets the support of, the systems and the institutions that are out here. So, making a career out of it is difficult, but having your art be a part of your life is something that you can do regardless of if you have outside support with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, yeah. Just riffing off of that into different industries, having started in the music industry and having faced so many different things. Firstly, for me, it was first as a woman, being in the music industry, because there's so many challenges and hurdles you have to overcome. And early in my career, being the only woman in a room sometimes was really scary. And I had to push through that in some ways. I spent a lot of time then seeking artists to collaborate with that were like-minded and in places where I felt safe. And in the times where I couldn't find it, I created my own. And that started to empower me when I started to create those spaces. And so I think as artists, when you start to feel like you're hitting a wall against something, you can create your own space. And I am always of that mindset, especially now, deeper in my career, and now branching into different lanes, like doing voiceover work and getting into acting and animation and these types of things. I look at it sometimes and I'm like, well, if there isn't a role for me, then I'll write the part myself, or if there isn't a song that I'm hearing for me, I'll write the song myself. So I just believe that if you don't hear something, you don't see something, you are there as an artist for a reason, and you need to create that.
I don't think I've put in the effort that Selena, Amrit, and you have, Jagdeep, in pursuing art as a career, to be very honest. I think I'm fortunate in the sense that I come from a privileged family where I can just tap into a network where I can just do something and not fear the consequences of what I'm doing. I can waste time and money on pursuing something and not care about the consequences. And I think, you know, for me, it's like now that I'm much more serious about it. I wish I put in the effort and that you three did when I was younger. So I'd have like a clearer picture as to how to pursue this at this age, to be very honest. So now I'm kind of lost. So these answers are great. And creating space, and like Selena, what she said is like creating that role for yourself, right? It's like, I feel like I'm a really good interviewer. I think I'm like really, really good. And I've always wanted to pursue that. And sometimes I'm just sitting there waiting like, hey, when is, you know, CBC gonna hire me for the Q radio show? And I was like, you know what the hell? I'm just gonna start interviewing a bunch of people, write a book, and we'll see what happens. So I totally agree with Selena and Amrit about creating your own space. And now with like Substack and Patreon, there are a lot of ways that you can actually be like, you know, make this a full-time career and just not need the help of these large institutions. Like you can just like, there's so many people on like TikTok with like millions of followers. I've never even heard of them. And they found their audience, they found their niche, and they're doing their thing. So I agree with both of you about creating your own space. And those were great answers. And I think they're going to help me in navigating that as well.
Absolutely. And there was something you said earlier about whether it's good or bad or something. And I do improv, like I do improv comedy and stuff like that. And something my improv coach always says, if you're showing up every time to get it right, then what are we really doing here? You have to fail. You have to mess it up. That's how you learn, you know? And we now celebrate, like when we screw something up in a scene, we applaud, like, you're a hot mess, you're a failure, like, great, because we don't do that enough, right? We get in our head so much. And it's taught me to be so less, you know, down on myself or whatnot. Like, I think the vulnerability, there's that power in that vulnerability of messing it up, and then you get to figure it out. And I think that's part of it, you know, it's really part of the cycle and the process.
And I think to add to that too, one thing I've tried to incorporate more in my approach is that, you know, you can work on it, you can create it, you can refine it as much as you want, but once it's out in the world, it's not yours anymore. You know, people are going to pick it apart and interpret it as, you know, however they want, and you can't really control that. You can't have a say on that. So it's more so about, like you're saying, just loving the process enough to want to deal with some of the negativity that might come up with it, and being fulfilled enough by the process of actually creating it outside of, you know, any outside validation.
Yeah, something one of my professors once told me, she's like, as an artist, one of the biggest things I can tell you is like, don't look back because you're not going that way. And I really like that. You know, just kind of sometimes we tend to kind of be like, we live in this mindset of like, shoulda, woulda, coulda. I was like, oh, only if I did that when I was that young, or this and that when I was that young. And it's just like, no, like, you know, like everything that we did in the past, we had to do it for a reason to get to where we are now. So no time was wasted. So I always try to remind myself of that. I'm like, you know, we can't look back because we're not going that way. And everything that we've done that's gotten us to this point, that was already meant to happen because it's gotten to us to kind of where we are now as artists. And I mean, I even think about like incredible artists, you know, like someone like Leonardo da Vinci, for example, like who didn't paint the Mona Lisa until he was like late into his 40s, or Toni Morrison, who didn't come out with her first book until she was almost 40. Like, you have such amazing, wonderful artists in all kinds of different mediums whose work can kind of teach us that, you know, when we kind of trap ourselves in this kind of mindset of, oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda, should have done that when like, that's all actually false and none of that exists. And it's just like kind of those voices in our head that are just trying to keep us back. And so I think just like those little daily reminders, you know, of like knowing that like we are where we are meant to be right now at this moment. And, you know, Selena's taught me that over the years. Me too. Amrit, you both have taught me that over the years. And so, you know, I think I think staying in the present moment as kind of artists and as people who want to kind of build and work on artistic projects can it's not always easy, but I think it can definitely, those reminders can definitely help. And I think like something else that I'm thinking about too, and I feel like I saw it on the chat as well, is I would love to hear more about what creative projects you guys are working on now, what's kind of been cooking in your head, what are you guys thinking about? What is it there out there that you guys would like to share with all of us?
So I'm actually working on this book that, again, Jagdeep and Amrit have been helping me with. And 2023, hopefully it'll be published in the spring. We have a verbal commitment from a publisher. And it's like, it's basically dealing with success in the South Asian diaspora, but like more habitual than the stories behind the people. Like, so habits, how they deal with self-confidence issues, how they deal with imposter syndrome, what they do the first thing in the morning, and sort of telling those stories, because we've done really, really well for ourselves. And I don't think there's enough of a spotlight on that yet. And I thought it'd be cool to sort of, you know, get all those stories, put them in like a Bible, sort of a self-help Bible of sorts, and then also talk about how they've impacted my journey and making me the person that I am. So I'm really excited about that. So hopefully that'll be up by 2023 and you guys will get to read that.
I'm working on some new music. I think throughout COVID and not being able to perform and interact with folks that way, it kind of, I guess, made me unmotivated to want to create music, because the creation is one side of it, but then being on stage is a totally different way to experience the songs that you make. So I felt like without that half of it, I kind of felt like, you know, kind of lost with regards to why I was creating music. But I started to think more about, you know, what do I love about this? And what I loved about it was, you know, creating, you know, whether I was, you know, sitting in a basement with a friend of mine and, you know, playing with different sounds and just trying to make beats together and, you know, trying different flows. So, you know, the creation process is what we really loved. So me and my friend B Magic, like, we've been working together for, you know, close to a decade at this point. We've done so many songs, but we've never actually done, you know, a proper project. So that's what we're working on right now. And our workflow is so good as far as, you know, we bounce a lot of ideas off each other, bounce a lot of energy off each other. And, you know, our workflow is, you know, it's very tight. So we figure, you know, we can crank these songs out pretty quickly. So our goal now is like, hey, we've waited so long to share our ideas as a group, in our story as a group with folks. So now let's just, you know, get absorbed fully in that creation process and just share everything that we create. Because sometimes as a songwriter, you doubt yourself, or you question the worth of an idea. But now we're just kind of, you know, embracing that creation process and embracing all ideas, seeing what we could do to refine them and, you know, make them as good as they can be, and then just letting them go. Because I know with certain projects I've done in the past, you get really attached to them, and, you know, you go back over and over to edit and revise, and you kind of get caught in that loop, which prevents you from taking the next step forward. So now we're just kind of, you know, being more, I guess, streamlined in our process from creation to release. So right now we're looking to release the first project, hopefully by the spring, and we're already working on the second one for later in the year. So we just want to, you know, fall in love with that creative process again when it was, you know, 2009 and nobody was listening to us. You know, just take it back to that essence.
Yeah, Amrit, I have a kind of a nerdy question for you too, but because like you took the concept of your book and transformed it into both like a literary work of art and a musical work of art, have you ever thought about like visual art? Like, have you ever thought about like these stories in like sculpture or painting or I don't know, like I was just thinking about like, because your writing is always so visual. Like when I was reading, maybe because it's like kind of the nerdy artist in me, but when I was reading the passages, like just the way you were describing like your dad's clothes and the suits your mom was wearing, and the street in Malta and the house in Brampton, like it's such a visual, the writing is so cinematic, it's so like lush and so visual. And so this is more of just like a kind of a geeky question, just like curious one that I add, but would you ever think about like kind of a visual experience for your written or your musical practice?
I haven't really thought about it. I think right now my mind just kind of works better with certain mediums. And being more auditory and being, I guess, more with writing, even with movies. I find it a hard time to sit through a movie and have my attention fully absorbed, but I can sit through an album and have no problem getting through it. So I think as of right now, my mind is not fully in that mode to think more so in a visual aspect, but I hope I can get there at some point, because I do like to draw. I haven't really shared a lot of my drawings out, in public, but that's something that I do enjoy doing, just kind of, for myself. So yeah, maybe one day it'll come out.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, the world is your oyster, and it's everyone else's oyster. And I mean, yeah, Selena, like what projects are you working on? What do you want to share with us? What are you thinking about? What are you cooking?
Some I had to sign an NDA for, so I can't say yet. But it could be out sometime. You'll have to just watch out. But something I have been working on, especially during the pandemic, is an online space, and you can continue to check out my work at selenadillon.com, which is where everything that I create will live. And in the last, I think, how many years now? Maybe 5 years, I've sort of tapped into my skills in photography and visual storytelling. And so my website is going to transform, and I'm working on that at the moment. A place where all of it will live, and some of the things that I sort of believe in when it comes to our wellness, and healing ourselves, loving ourselves, empowering ourselves. My website will kind of have all of that: music, my photography, writing, and some of the things that happen in our community that I'd love to share. And the piece is actually, this was really special tonight for me. So thank you so much again, Jagdeep, and the museum for even having this today, because I figured out my setup and how to record and perform. So it was really exciting. I hadn't figured it out, and it just came to me like a light bulb. So the songs that I actually performed today, I haven't published yet. And so that was special. And so again, thank you to everybody that came and were able to hear that. And so I hope to get these songs recorded this year as well, so that I can share them. But all with time. My work is always very intentional and timing. And the other piece that I'm working on too is revealing itself. It was starting as memoir, and I learned from a mentor who is a memoir writer. And I think later this year it will begin to sort of show more of what it wants to become.
Oh, I guess one other thing I'm working on too. I've always wanted to learn how to play keys, so I have my first lesson tomorrow.
Yay! Yay!
That's so exciting. Well, I mean, I have one kind of last question, and it was, I mean, it's kind of an intense question, and you can respond to it if you would like. But if it doesn't call to you, that's okay. But one of my favorite artists that I studied in grad school, her name was Melanie Molyneux, and she's in her 70s now, and she has this quote that I think about often, and it's really layered, it's really complex, but it's kind of lived in my head for many years. And she says, "How can human pain and social suffering, past and present, be rendered in such a way that its representation nurtures and illuminates life?" I mean, I think about that question because I thought a lot about its relationship with this concept of Bharosa and of trust. And I put it in the chat for everyone too, but if any of you guys feel called to respond to it, I would love to hear how you think about this concept of taking trauma and rendering it and in this way where life is nurtured. Because I feel like in each of your three works as interdisciplinary artists and writers and activists and organizers and teachers and many things that you do, you guys have always taught me that. So this is kind of a abbreviated version of the question, but I thought a lot about kind of ending this program with a kind of an intention. And so I wanted to go to Nalini Malini's work. And thank you, Pamela, so much for sharing her work in the chat too. But address it in any way if you guys would like.
For me, you know, I don't know if I think for me, what's been most effective is comedy, to be honest. And sometimes that gets me in trouble as well, to be honest. I remember my grandfather passed away, and he was like my hero. Like, I think there are very few people in your life that when they pass away, your life's never really the same. And there's maybe 4 or 5 people, and my grandfather was one of them. And I remember when he passed away, my buddy made a joke about how, and this might sound inappropriate, about how they should have a app for to get new grandfathers called Stumble, a play on Bumble. And for me, that was like, I like that. For me, that helped sort of as compartmentalize the trauma. Do you know what I mean? I've always, like, you know, I've spoken about, you know, my issues with being sexually assaulted when I was younger on the podcast. And I always appreciated joking about it because that's what felt normal to me. And that doesn't work for a lot of people, but for me, comedy has been super, super helpful. And I'd like to do that in the future in a more tasteful way, because I think that matters, because you can really offend and sort of hurt people if you don't do it in a tasteful way and if you don't do it in a respectful way. But for me, I think comedy has been that sort of crutch that I hold on to compartmentalize that trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I think humor is always a vehicle for the truth in many ways. And so, yeah, that's a really powerful medium to think about how to deal with trauma and how to deal with kind of life's struggles. Another kind of just piggyback on that, do you have like a kind of a group of comedians and whose work you look at and who've inspired your thinking about comedy as a craft of healing?
Yeah, but those comedians are in trouble nowadays. You know what? Growing up, and right now, I think, you know, I don't vibe with Chappelle as much, but growing up, Chappelle really, like, his commentary on racism and how he dealt with that, I think that helped me a ton. And, you know, guys like Bill Burr, you know, they do help. Even Aziz Ansari sometimes. I still try to find that medium. I think sometimes it's difficult. I don't know if mainstream comedians can connect with the immigrant experience as much. And I think that's still missing. So for me, I get that from my friends. You know, like sometimes when me and Amrit hang out, and we will make fun of each other and say some crazy stuff, and that helps. So for me, it's not so much, you know, comedians as it is the circle around me. So yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really cool and honest and really raw answer. I really appreciated that, Sumit. Amrit and Selena, yeah, would you guys like to think about that question as like an ending point for the conversation, or if not, is there anything else you guys would like to share?
Yeah, I think with music, at least for me in particular, you know, I think as human beings in general, we tend to internalize a lot of our traumas. We feel like we don't want to be a burden. We feel like people won't understand. We're afraid of judgment if we share our experiences. But I feel like with music, when people turn that trauma into a song, it creates a connection and essentially lets you know that you're not alone in experiencing what you're experiencing. And I've had so many albums that, you know, when I was, you know, struggling with my own mental health issues, where I felt like I couldn't share this and I had it internalized, but there were so many songs that were directly speaking to the same things that I was living through. And I felt like these artists were speaking to me in a way that I didn't know how to verbalize yet. So I feel like that's, at least for me, I feel like that's the main goal of all art, is to make us feel something and to generate a sense of connection and empathy. So I just, you know, to speak to that, it illuminates the things that we don't want to share or we're afraid of sharing. and, you know, I guess makes it more acceptable, or lets us know that it's okay to go through what we're going through, and, you know, gives us a little bit of courage and motivation to reach out and to actually, you know, take that step to share. So yeah, you know, translating that pain and that suffering through music is, I think it's big as far as fostering a connection.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of piggyback off of that question as well, similarly to Sumit, like, do you have like a kind of a cohort, or like a set of records or artists whose music you always return to, and who've kind of helped your own artistic practice over the years? Like, I remember in your book you wrote about the experience of going to Kendrick Lamar and seeing him in California. What other musicians or songwriters or hip hop artists have you turned to, who've kind of guided your path as an artist over the years? Who would you like to
I mean, there's a lot of folks, you know, going back to Tupac, Biggie, Wu-Tang, Nas, you know, even Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder. You know, there's so many just different stuff, like different genres. You know, I try not to limit myself to just one genre. Florence and the Machine is like, I'm a big fan of them as well. Yeah, you know, just anybody that is authentic with their expression, and I think that's what translates most through the music, is that authenticity and the honesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Selena, what would you like to share?
I think going within, and that's something that I've done so much of. And this notion of knowing I'm exactly where I need to be, doing what I need to be doing with what I have, has given me a sense of peace. So whatever I'm creating from that place is what needs to be released. And I allow that to come out, whether it's, again, through the pen, through a camera, through sometimes a paintbrush, even though I'm not a painter by any means, but whatever it is, I allow it to be released. And I do remember at a moment I'll share during the time in 2020, it was a really dark week, and the only thing I could do was just continue to play my guitar over and over. And I played the same song. It was Love by Music Soul Child. And I played it over and over and over again. It wasn't my own song, but it was something that I felt it was serving as a therapy in the moment. And that then inspired me and gave me the courage to then write from my own space and from my own thoughts. So yeah, going within is always just, and has remained to be the most powerful tool, because by doing that is when I can come out and connect with myself and with others.
Yeah, what a beautiful, I feel like that's like the perfect sentiment to kind of wrap up tonight's conversation, going within. It's everything from going within to Tupac to Da Vinci to all of it. So yeah, that was so beautiful. And, you know, I just want to thank the three of you so much for taking the time to be a part of this program, and, you know, trusting me, going back to that word of trust, trusting me to curate this, and for sharing your time. And you know, I'm just so grateful. And, you know, this is the last program that I will curate for my exhibition Chase, and it started off in 2019 to 2022. And, you know, all the artists, again, you know, we had Gurjeet and Kiran and Baljeet and another Baljeet and Nikhil and Pamela and Surinder and Simranpreet and Kim and Kathy to Selena Yu and Amrit Yu and Sumit Yu, like all these artists. And I feel like it's so special to end this exhibition with tonight's specific program, because I think what I'm going to be taking away from the many, many silver linings is that process of just going back to trust and trusting yourself and going within and building community with yourself first, and then building it with others. And I think that process is just something that I'll always turn to and get inspiration from artists like the three of you guys to do that. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your creativity and your words of wisdom. And to our audience, thank you so much for such thoughtful questions and comments. And it was such a joy to kind of open up this treasure trove of these comments and questions and see how people were we're feeling for tonight's program. And Leah, I will hand it over to you for any final remarks, but thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. Jagdeep, thanks very much for putting this together. And Selena, Amrit, and Sumit, I really enjoyed this, and thank you. Thank you to all our participants, our audience, for sticking with us here. It was really amazing. It was really moving, I felt. So thank you very much. So everybody, please, once the museum reopens, please check out Chase at the Textile Museum of Canada. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.